everyone. Oh, that was a very high-pitched hello. I hope you're all okay and that you've had a nice few days in the sun. I know I have. I've been outside in the garden doing lots of exercise. I've bought myself some, don't laugh, because I'm sure it's something you could never imagine me doing. Don't laugh. You're in year 4, no laughter. I am doing boxing. I'm a boxer. I know, YouTube sensation and a boxer. Did you ever think your year 4 teacher could get so cool? No, me neither. I didn't think it either. Anyway, I hope you are all okay and you are ready to read the next part of the story. We are on page 97 and we are going to read a bit more of the story today. We got up to the part where Humphrey and Pickering had kidnapped Dorcas, kind of, even though he was there himself, and they tied him to a chair. And Pickering said to Humphrey that they were going to make him talk first and then he can do whatever he wants with him. So it'd be very interesting to hear. I'd be very interested. Come on, Miss Hazeldine, get your words out. I would be very interested to hear what happened next. To hear what happened, honestly. It's a bad day today, isn't it? A bad hair day and a bad word day. No, it's not a bad word day, it's bad. Anyway, let's start reading. Page 97, if you're following along at home. Humphrey clapped happily. Now, Pickering stood in front of Dorcas with his arms crossed. You're going to tell me about the gang you work for and when they plan to rob me. Now you're being ridiculous, Pickers. Humphrey's face split into a huge grin. No one in their right mind would steal that pile of rotting junk out there. Pickering reached down and picked the axe up off the floor. What I mean is, Humphrey said hurriedly, it's more likely he's a spy from the council, gathering evidence so that they can evict us. Pickering's eyes shot wide open and then narrowed as he considered this possibility. Then we definitely can't let him go. That's why I thought we should make him into a pie, Humphrey said hopefully. I'll let you have him once you've got rid of those insects, Pickering said, offering his hand to his cousin. Deal, Humphrey grinned, shaking it. I'm not from the council, or a gang, or a thief, Dorcas cried. I'm just a kid, and I heard you arguing, and I saw the beetles, and... That's what you would say, Pickering cut him off. We're not idiots, you know. He looked at Humphrey. Well, I'm not. He picked up a giant T-shirt from the floor and ripped a strip from it. Hey, that's my shirt, Humphrey protested. Really? It looks like a dirty old rag, said Pickering, resting his axe against the armchair and tying the gag over Dorcas's mouth. Dorcas pulled his head back, trying to resist, but the horrid rag closed over his mouth, smelling like a musty dead animal. It made him think of maggots, and he retched. Now give me that tub. Humphrey did as he was told, and prized off the lid. Dorcas wriggled, the skin on his wrists burning as he tried to get free from the ropes that held him tight. He had to get away. Uncle Max was right. These men were dangerous. Pickering cupped his hands, scooping up a load of cranberry sauce and splattering it down on Dorcas's head. It was cold and sticky, making him shiver as it dripped slowly down his back. Hey, don't waste it, Humphrey protested. That's good stuff. I'll get you some more. Pickering reached down for another handful. Now, you listen to me, boy. This stuff, he held his hands under Dorcas's nose, is cranberry sauce, and it can't have escaped your notice that right behind you is a monstrous hive of creepy crawlies, full of millions of disgusting beasties that bite and sting and burrow and scratch. And do you know what they eat most of all, what they love to eat most of all in the whole wide world? Pickering smeared a handful of sauce across Dorcas's face. Cranberry sauce. Dorcas shuddered as the cold sauce oozed down his neck and chest. Pickering pushed up the sleeves of his green jumper and rubbed it down his arms. Now, if you don't tell me who sent you to spy on us, he was nose to nose with Dorcas, I'm going to let those creepy crawlies eat you alive. Darkus stared at Pickering. He supposed it made sense that these beetles would like cranberry sauce, especially as Humphrey kept a bucket of it in his room. Baxter liked sweet fruits too, but thanks to his beetle handbook, Darkus knew something Pickering didn't. A lot of beetles are vegetarian. First, they'll munch through the cranberry sauce and then they'll burrow under your skin. Pickering lifted another handful of the pink gloop. Next, they'll drink your blood and dine on your muscles until only your puny bones are left. He pulled up Darkus's trouser legs and splattered the sauce on his shins. And there are even some nasty critters in there who eat bones. Pickering was obviously enjoying himself. So this is your last chance. He pulled down the gag. What do you have to say for yourself? I'm from next door, Darkus insisted. I live next door. Liar! Pickering replaced the gag angrily. The professor who lives next door does not have children. Darkus struggled against the ropes, but this was no use. Maybe you'll feel like talking after the beetles have stripped all the skin from your body. Pickering gave a horrible, simpering laugh. I wanted to do that, Humphrey sulked. Look, here comes a big, black, ugly one with a giant horn. Oh dear, he looks hungry. Darkus looked down and almost wept with relief to see Baxter crawling across the floor towards him. The beetle, his beetle, had heard him call. He didn't need a control test to know that Baxter understood him. He immediately felt braver, and the fear that fluttered around his chest calmed down. I'm hungry, Humphrey complained, staring at Darkus. A loud knock sounded on the front door downstairs. Who on earth could that be? Pickering stood up straight and looked over his shoulder, like a startled meerkat. I dunno, Humphrey shrugged. Pickering grabbed his cousin's doughy arm and walked him out into the hall. I'm not done with you yet, he growled at Darkus, slamming the door shut. Darkus immediately tried to reach the knots holding his wrists together, but his fingers couldn't get a grip on the rope. A familiar weight pressed down on his shoulder as Baxter landed and then crawled to the back of his neck where his gag was tied. He felt the beetle slide his horn between the gag and his skin, pulling at the cloth. He was sawing it! After a few seconds, the gag slipped down and Darkus spat it out, gladly pulling in a lungful of clean air. Baxter! Boy, am I glad to see you. Can you help with the ropes now? Baxter turned to the mountain of cups and rubbed his hind leg against his elytra, making a series of strange chirping noises. Darkus hadn't heard Baxter make a noise like that before. He realised it must be what his book called stridulation, or stridulation, not sure how to pronounce that one. A sighing sound, like sugar pouring into a jar, filled the room as the beetles emerged from their mountain and scuttled towards him. Pickering and Humphrey were still outside the door. We can't let anyone in case they find the boy, Pickering sounded agitated. What if it's the police? Humphrey asked. The police? Pickering squealed. Why would it be the police? That thing the boy said about kidnapping being illegal? But we've only just done it. How would they know he was here? I don't know. You go down and answer the door. Why me? What will I say? Something stupid, probably. Pickering made a frustrated, strangled sound. The persistent knocking came again. All right, we'll both go, Pickering declared, and Darkus heard them clomping down the stairs. He felt a ticklish sensation as beetles started crawling up his legs. He sucked in his breath, unsure of how he felt about being covered in beetles. But soon they were climbing up his back, clambering round his neck and scurrying through his hair. Shivers rippled up and down his spine as tiny clawed feet walked across his skin. Darkus let out a sigh as he realised he didn't mind them being on him at all. They were heavy. It was like being buried in sand, but the feeling of so many beetles was quite nice. He tried not to laugh as they tickled him and to keep still. He didn't want to squash anyone. With his eyes closed, covered head to toe in beetles, he thought about his dad. You're not going to believe this when I tell you, he said to himself silently. In seconds he could move his arm. He tested the ropes. Yes! Both his hands were free. He tried his feet and the cords fell away. The beetles had chewed, burrowed and cut all the way through them. Darkus got up, carefully splattering a blob of cranberry sauce onto the floor, and crouched down to thank the beetles who'd rescued him. He was delighted to see the gaggle of red giraffe-necked weevils amongst the horde, and the flashy jewel beetles too. But the most impressive beetle on the floor, by far, was a gigantic Goliath beetle, easily recognised by its black and white zebra-like markings. It stood quite still, its antennae barely twitching, and Darkus wondered if it was very old. No illustration in any book could capture how awesome these beetles were. Darkus touched his face. It wasn't even tacky. The beetles had freed him and given him a wash. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're all amazing." Darkus touched it. Sorry, I've just read that bit. Outside, the street light flickered on, casting a yellow glow into the room. It must be nearly 6 o'clock. Uncle Max would be home soon. Darkus heard voices downstairs. Pickering and Humphrey must have opened the door. And suddenly, the beetles were withdrawing quickly, like a departing shadow, back into the mountain of cups. Something seemed to have spooked them. Only the Goliath beetle moved slowly. Darkus ran silently to the window and looked down into the street. The sleek black car he'd seen outside the museum was parked across the road. A shock of fear gripped his stomach. Lucretia Cutter was here, but why? He looked over his shoulder at the mountain, and the realisation hit him. It was full of spectacular beetles. Lucretia Cutter must be interested in beetles, or she wouldn't sponsor the Natural History Museum's collection. And that unsettling yellow ladybird he'd seen this morning was something to do with her too. Uncle Max clearly thought so. Lucretia Cutter could only be here for one reason. For the beetles. But how did she know they were even here? He remembered what Pickering had said about the two men dressed in black wearing face masks and rubber gloves. Did they work for Lucretia Cutter? Darkus crouched down with his back against the giant pink armchair and powered his heels into the floor as he pushed against it with all of his strength, budging it jerkily across the floor. It was a heavy piece of furniture and wider than the door frame. He wedged it up against the closed door, under the handle, and then he turned back to the mountain. "Listen," he said urgently. "You're all in terrible danger. Lucretia Cutter is here. She's bad news. I don't know what she wants, but..." He thought about all the beetles in drawers with pins through them. "I think if she sees you, she'll want to kill you. Do you understand? You mustn't let her get in here." He scooped up Baxter. "We have to go, but we'll be back. I promise." Darkus ran to the window ledge, throwing Baxter into the air as he jumped out towards the sycamore tree. He caught hold of the first branch, dropped down to the one below and swung to the ground, landing in a crouch as Baxter glided down and settled on his shoulder. Chapter 7, The Visit. I'm just going to read a couple of pages and then I'll stop. Humphrey blundered down the stairs with Pickering right behind him and wrenched the front door open. "Goodness me, you smell terrible," said a disdainful female voice. "And you're not even dressed." Humphrey snorted as if he'd been slapped and gawped at the stunning woman on the doorstep. She had gold lips and her skin shimmered like polished marble. Her black bobbed hair framed a large pair of sunglasses that wrapped around her face like a visor. He wondered if she was a movie star. He felt Pickering buffeting against his backside, trying to see who it was at the door. "Am I addressing Mr. Pickering Risk and Mr. Humphrey Gamble?" the woman asked, sneering. "Indeed," Pickering squeezed past and bowed low. "Pickering Aloysius Risk, Esquire, at your service. How may I help you?" Doesn't sound very much like Pickering, does it? He's obviously trying to show off for some reason. The woman, who was leaning on 2 black sticks and wearing a white lab coat, reached into her pocket and withdrew a clenched fist decorated with a dazzling array of diamond rings. The cousins stared, mesmerised, as she lowered her hand and 5 black fingernails sprang out like flick knives. revealing 3 dead beetles in her palm. One was red, one was green, and one was gold. "Recognise these?" A painted eyebrow arched above her sunglasses. Humphrey started, uncomprehendedly holding her at her hand. "Have you come about the boy?" he asked gormlessly. "What boy?" With a yell, Pickering pushed Humphrey aside and slammed the door. "What is the matter with you?" Humphrey asked. "What's the matter with me? What's the matter with you?" Pickering panted, his back against the door. "Do you want to go to prison? Don't tell her anything, especially not about the boy." His eyes whirled. "She must be from the council." "She doesn't look like she's from the council. Did you see her car across the road?" Humphrey whistled. "Now that's what I call a passion wagon." "She has to be from the council." "I think she liked what she saw." Humphrey beat his chest like a gorilla. "Otherwise, how do you explain those beetles?" "What beetles?" "The ones in her hand. The sweeties." "They were beetles, not sweets. And those weren't just any beetles." Pickering clapped his hand to his forehead. "They're the same 3 beetles I pulled from my hair and posted to the council 3 weeks ago to show them how squalid you are. Red, green and gold." "We could open the door and find out," Humphrey suggested, sniffing his armpits and checking his breath. "No." Pickering shook his head. "We have to get rid of her." "I can hear you!" The woman's voice stabbed through the door like a knife. Pickering yelped and leapt forwards. Humphrey made a decision. It wasn't every day a pretty lady knocked on his door, and he wanted to keep talking to her, so he lifted Pickering out of the way and reopened the door. "My most gigantic apologies," he said, bowing. "Ignore my cousin, he's not right." He crossed his eyes and stuck out his tongue to demonstrate Pickering's craziness. "Mr. Humphrey, Winston Gamble at your service." He offered his clammy hand. "Who are you?" Pickering demanded. "What do you want?" "My name is Lucretia Cutter." The woman lifted her chin as if she expected the cousins to have heard of her. Humphrey stared blankly back at her and looked at Pickering, who obviously hadn't heard of her either. "Look, you have something that I want," she said. I'm going to stop there. Oh, this looks like a good bit. I'm looking forward to reading this next week. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for today. I will post another video on Tuesday. I'm going to be doing videos on a Tuesday and a Thursday now because it takes me so long to put the video together. You wouldn't believe it, but I make that many mistakes. I have to do about 15 takes. So anyway, I've just rolled with it today. So that's that. I will see you on Tuesday. Please email me. Please go on Mathletics if you can. Me and Miss Grocott will be on there today at 2 o'clock. And also Miss Grocott's going on every day at 2 o'clock. Practice your times tables. Don't forget times table test on a Friday, just like we would if we were at school. I'd really like to see more people having a go at it if you can. I appreciate it's not always possible, but see if you can so I can share the results and there's more people doing it. Okay, have a lovely day everyone and I'll see you soon. Bye.